this was kind of an interesting assignment. I think it felt really daunting to begin with, especially at the start of it. When we were just kind of told that we were going to be doing a session role play, I think that definitely felt overwhelming, but I do feel like it is a perfect way to kind of wrap up this class. And I do feel like I really learned a lot about just, running a meeting with a client in a group and things like that. So I do feel like I felt prepared for this assignment. It's kind of interesting though, because I do kind of feel like I am so new in this. This feels very early on in the social work program. And so I don't know, sometimes I just kind of felt like, it's like jumping in 2 feet first, and I don't know, it's like I feel like I don't know a ton about running one, so then to like critique one feels kind of daunting as well. But something that I noticed as I was speaking, and I'm doing it now and trying not to, but those filler words that I use, the or like or so, and even repeated phrases of like that's great or things like that, I felt very conscious of that and wondering if things like that may be distracting to a client. I think in the real thing or in future practices, it's just important to be mindful of the things that I may be saying that can be a distraction as well. This I wasn't able to figure out how to do the video, but had that been a video, I think important things to also note would be my if I'm fidgeting, what my facial expressions look like, and just to make sure that like I'm showing my client in a very in a physical way with with my body language that I am paying attention to them and I am listening and hearing them. Something I did take note of as I was speaking was to allow the time for him to finish. I tried to make sure that I wasn't speaking over him, that I was allowing him to really finish his full sentence and be done with, answering that question or, speaking about that goal or that part of the process. So I was trying to be conscious of allowing a time for a space right there. However, I know that I speak really quickly, and that has, been something that I've been critiqued on for most of my life. And so that's something I do also need to be conscious of, is just taking the time to slow down, especially because it can be difficult for people to process what is just being said to them, especially if auditory processing is difficult and they do better with reading or like reading along or things like that. So I definitely think that slowing down just in my speech a little bit, I stumbled over my words. My brain was working a little faster than my mouth could a couple times in the session role play, and so that's definitely just something that I need to be conscious of as well. Something else I also noticed was that when there was mention of like the parts of the process or the goals that were set, I found myself saying we. And I don't know how entirely appropriate that is, I guess, because it's like hypothetically, I was there for this process, and I did assist in this, but I feel like it probably would be more appropriate to, especially when speaking of goals and the work that they've put in to to assign that, give that autonomy, and like that where credit is due, that they set this goal and they made the plan to and did follow through. But in things like, like we wondered about your sleep schedule, like I kind of wonder like where that is, like if I should just give total autonomy to the client at all times and be like, oh, and then you noticed your sleep schedule or you wondered about your sleep schedule, like does that feel disingenuous to assign them some kind of like credit with maybe they hadn't considered their sleep schedule, or I don't know. That's something that I caught myself doing a lot, was saying we, and I was I'm curious about how entirely appropriate that is, because obviously I do think that for the most part we should be giving the credit to our client. because it is theirs. But another thing that I noticed was that when I mentioned, this hypothetical form that he filled out before of like how satisfied he was with our work, I probably could have been more specific and used like an actual like goal measuring tool, whether that was like a 1 through 10 or something like that. Obviously I wouldn't want to be redundant because if they did just fill out the form, I don't want to like go through every part or anything like that, but I probably could have asked, is there something specific about the process that you enjoyed or found difficult? Or I think that maybe I could ask a little bit more specific questions to maybe give them an opportunity to say more than just like, it was great, or, because I guess I hope clients are honest, but sometimes, maybe they're feeling, right to your face that they're not going to be like, it was really awful, or you were really hard to work with at first, or, so maybe if I was a little bit more specific about like, what did you find difficult, or, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you feel about the goal setting process? How did you feel about the work, that we did? How do you feel about, just kind of like, rather than being more overall, I think I could have been a little bit more specific with that. Overall, I was kind of shocked at kind of how natural it did feel to just work, to speak about goals and to find ways to praise him for the time and effort that he did put in. That feels a lot like, conversations that I have with friends. And so I was kind of surprised that it did feel more natural than I was expecting, even though it felt like such a daunting task at first. But yeah, overall, definitely have lots of areas to improve on, and lots to consider for my next one.